Are you ready to make a difference in the lives of others? If so, then you should consider becoming a recovery coach. Recovery coaches are trained to help people in recovery, seeking recovery, or struggling with addiction. They provide support, guidance, and resources to help people on their recovery journey. CCAR Training is the leading provider of recovery coach training programs. Our programs are designed to teach you the skills and knowledge, what we call the science, while giving you an understanding of your own art needed to be a successful recovery coach. We offer a variety of training options, most offered online. If you're interested in becoming a recovery coach or just learning more, I encourage you to visit our website or contact us today. We would be happy to answer any questions you have and help you get started on your journey to becoming a recovery coach. We hope you'll visit us at www.addictionrecoverytraining.org to learn more.
Are you in the recovery field and looking to expand your knowledge of the many pathways to recovery? Do you want to network with the nation's leading recovery leaders? If so, then the Multiple Pathways of Recovery Conference is for you. CCAR, Recovery Iowa, and the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services are bringing the message of multiple pathways to our friends in the Midwest. Join us August 21st through the 23rd at the Embassy Suites in Des Moines, Iowa for the National Recovery Conference, where we share and educate one another about the many different pathways, methods, practices, programs, and belief systems recoveries can use to enhance their recovery journey and sustain long-term recovery. Whether it's a 12-step, secular, a spiritual religious modality, medication-assisted recovery, or wellness-based and sober active communities, we've got you covered. At MPRC, you'll have the opportunity to connect with the recovery community, broaden your knowledge of the multiple pathways, and be refreshed in your journey of recovery, whatever that may be. So don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Tickets are on sale now at ccarconference.org. That's ccarconference.org. The Multiple Pathways to Recovery Conference, the National Recovery Conference, where all pathways to recovery meet.
This conference brought to you by CCAR, Recovery Iowa, paid for by State Opioid Response Funds, the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services Bureau of Substance Use, a sub-award from the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Join us on the Recovery Matters podcast, where we celebrate the power of resilience and explore multiple pathways to recovery.
I'm Sonia Kahlon. I am from Toronto, Canada, and I've been in the States for 25 years. I recently became a recovery coach, and I've been sober for 6 years and 2 months. I had been kind of like going to meetings on and off for 5 years, but didn't really have a community. And so I just started really going to these non-12-step online meetings really regularly, and they were really big. I wasn't like participating, but just listening. And I don't know, I remember one day being like, I really want to drink. And you know, there's people struggling on their like third day. And it's like, I have 5 years. Like, can't I just, you know, what would somebody do to have 5 years? Like, so, I just kept going. It was definitely like one day at a time. I think I grew up, super insecure kid, like the only Indian kid in a predominantly white school. And so I always had felt kind of like I didn't fit in, which I think is pretty typical of people that end up in addiction, that there's like some discomfort. And so, yeah, I think that I was introduced to alcohol really early. Indian people drink a lot. So I saw a lot of drinking growing up, and there was always a lot of alcohol around. We always, like any house we lived in, there was a bar. And so I think the first time I drank, it was just like, this is amazing. This is what's been missing from my life. Like all this like anxious, like energy and like discomfort just like went away. And so I think I just, from that point on, used it socially, and then also would use it. I would drink alone. So probably starting at 13, 14, 15. And so, yeah, I binge drank all through college. And then when I, graduated and I was working and I started a business, I started drinking every day, which I think was a pretty natural progression from like the level of I would binge whenever I could. So whenever I didn't have something to accomplish at school, I would binge. And so, yeah, my daily drinking just got out of control. I was squeezing it in to, a few hours at night when I wasn't working. And I was just not sleeping. I was hungover every day. And that went on for almost 10 years until I just like I started admitting to myself there was a problem probably like 2 or 3 years before I quit. And I just couldn't picture a life without alcohol. And I think that's like the biggest barrier, right? Is that it's like you feel like you have to decide whether you're going to drink again. And so
I always look at it like a relationship, right? And if like, I don't want to break up with this person, I've been through so much.
Yeah, it's like, and then it's like, what if I miss it? Like, how am I going to get through the day? And I think because I didn't have any other coping skills, it just was like unimaginable to me to like come home from work and do what? Like, I was like, what? Go to the gym? Like, read a book? Like it. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. It's like, what am I going to do? And so I was super lucky. I just had all these things for like, however 20 years that I hadn't done because I'd been drinking. So I didn't have any hobbies. I didn't have any interests. I wasn't super close to my family. And so I just did all those things that I thought were missing from my life because of my drinking. And it worked. And so that was sort of my pathway, was just being like curious about things. Because I think you lose that when you're an addict. You kind of lose that curiosity, like about life. And so, yeah, I just did that. I sold my business and started working for the incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, teaching entrepreneurship. I worked with victims of sex trafficking, and something just started to shift in my mind that I wanted to be of service. And so I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I just wanted to keep being a part of people's lives who were also struggling. And so, yeah, I did that. I still do that. And it was really when I started thinking like, maybe I should be sharing my story more. And then that's when things got a little complicated in my life. So I started like writing about my sobriety, and I started making art about it, and it was like getting recognized a little bit. And my ex-husband I think I didn't ask, right? I didn't ask permission to share this part of my life. And I think, just wasn't comfortable with that idea that his wife was an addict. Like, we were super successful, and, it didn't like fit for him that I was out there saying,
you feel
I'm an
like
addict,
you feel like you needed to ask him, though. You said that you needed to ask him for permission for you to talk about it.
Yeah, I didn't feel like it, but I noticed that I was going ahead and doing things, and his reaction was not what you would expect, right? Like, you would expect someone to be like super proud that you are like making art and it got in a gallery, and like super proud that you're like writing and things are getting published. And he wasn't. And sometimes like I always like remember this one time I asked him to read something I had written, and he just corrected like the grammar and handed it back to me. And I was like, I just like poured my entire life like out like into this essay. And he was like, I think you need to put a comma here. And so, I was sort of naive in the sense that I thought, well, we're just into different things. He was really into crypto. And so I was really into recovery, and we got along great. It wasn't that. I don't know if I ignored it or I just didn't want to see it. And I knew when we would go out, we lived in New York, and when we would go out with friends, and I would order like something non-alcoholic, and someone would go to ask me like, oh, you don't drink? And he'd say, yeah, she doesn't drink, before I could use the word sober, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he didn't want that.
Maybe it was taboo for him, right? Some people grew up like that, like they raised by individuals that they want to block the sky with their hands, like, oh no, don't look up, don't look over there, and if you don't look over there, nothing will happen.
For sure.
It's hard because, especially if you're a person that feels like you don't have a voice, imagine not getting that support. You feel like you're never gonna have that voice.
Yeah, and that is something I was lucky because I had support from, my brother was in AA, and he was really proud of me. And so I was getting what I needed. And so I didn't really push him on it. I also knew too, that he was sort of like a tough love person, that like, there's no such thing as like an addiction. Like, you just don't have the willpower. Like, you need to gather up the willpower. Like, it's not a disease. It's not, you just need to stop. And so I think when people see things that way, it's really hard for them to have any like empathy for what you're struggling with. They just look at it as a weakness.
So what, from that feeling that you got from all that, what happened?
So yeah, I was getting that feeling, but I didn't take it seriously. Like, we were still great. And then I got like an impression a couple of days before it happened, like he was really kind of like agitated and unhappy and just said, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, like kind of this midlife crisis thing for like literally just like 2 days. And then on the third day, he woke up and said, I think the problem is you. I think that I can't be happy with you. I think that basically you are not the same person. Like, you're introverted, you're a lot, because I was like the life of the party for like a long time. And now I just like really like hanging out with my 8-year-old niece, like baking a pie. And that was not the person he married. And so, and on top of that, I was just I wasn't interested in making money as much. And I think that was a huge sticking point for us, was that was sort of our identity, was building a business, scaling a business, selling a business. And I just was no longer really interested in doing something that didn't have some sort of social impact. And so we really, our values just weren't the same. And so when he said it, I just didn't believe him. I said, no, like, what do you mean? Like, we're great. And so he left, he did leave, and he said those few things to me. And then over time, I started to realize like every problem he sort of had with me or our relationship was related to my sobriety. And that was such a tough thing to admit to myself. Like, are you saying like if I had kept drinking, like my husband would have stayed? It was just such a it was so hard to get my mind around it.
Yeah, that's hard to hear, right? Like, especially for someone, if someone is like in early recovery and was to hear that, and they're not strong enough, they're not strong mentally, and they hear this.
Yeah, and I thought I was super strong in my sobriety, and then that just threw me into this space where I was like, who am I? If this sober person, this sober version of me isn't something that someone wants in their life, like, what am I doing? Like, what was the point? And so I really did question why I was sober. And so I thought about it a lot. I thought about drinking a lot. I was so uncomfortable, just with like the pain of this breakup. And we were together so long. And so
18 years is a long time.
18 years. 18 years is a long time to end overnight. And when he left, I never saw him again, and almost never spoke to him again. He called, I think I called a couple of times, a couple of texts, and then he actually just disappeared. Wow. Like, from our entire, all of our friends. Like, no one has heard from him now in over a year. I think that it just wasn't the life that he wanted. Like, I think he still wanted to go out and party. And I think while I was getting sober, he just put it on the back burner and maybe thought things would change. And so, yeah, I mean, it was clear the person that he was, obviously he was cheating. And so the person that he picked is someone who's a super hard drinker who went out every night of the week. And so I know it sounds weird, but that gave me comfort, because I thought, oh, well, that's never going to be again. So
yeah.
If that's what you wanted, then maybe I am okay. I can't do that. That's not an option for me.
Yeah, that's the power of recovery right there. And that's basically growth, right? So you grew into this new person. And then that's what I would ask you. Who is this new person now?
The new me is, I don't compromise a lot anymore. And so I'm really clear on, what I want to do as a purpose. And I want to be in recovery and help people in recovery and talk about recovery. And especially for me, high functioning addicts. And I was a very high functioning addict. I graduated multiple times. I had a successful business. I had a house, but it doesn't mean, that's not an excuse to not admit you have a problem. And so a lot of people that I work with as a recovery coach are really high functioning, people have great jobs. They're not the, and they don't relate sometimes. They don't want to use the word addict, which I'm really quick to call myself an addict, but I have some understanding of that when they think like, well, I don't look like the typical addict. I didn't lose my job. I haven't gotten a DUI. I haven't been incarcerated. But it's like you still have a pretty significant substance abuse issue. And so that is sort of my like niche, like in life now, is helping other people that were in a similar situation as me.
You said that your family, it's like your father said. You said your father drunk a lot.
He had a bar in our basement.
So you used to sneak down there and grab the alcohol. Now, was it yourself or your siblings?
Yeah. So my sibling, my brother, is pretty significantly older than me, 6 years older, and he started drinking probably when he was 15 and I was probably 9. And I knew something was off with him for a long time, but I didn't really know what. And so when he kind of left home, that's when I sort of started drinking. And then I started to figure out, I was like, oh, that's what he was doing down here. Like, that's what he was up to. But my dad wasn't, my dad was more of a binge drinker. Like, he drank with his friends on the weekends. And so looking back, I don't even know if he had a problem with alcohol, but his friends certainly did, like many of them. And so I was around that a lot. And with Indian people, they only drink like whiskey. And so a drink to them is like a tumbler full of whiskey. And my dad would say, like, I just had one drink. And I'm like, you had like 7 drinks. Like, that is literally like 7 drinks. That is not one drink. And so there was a weird standard for like what was over drinking and what was, so it wasn't like, oh, I'm not drunk. I just had one drink. And it's like, why are you throwing up? Like,
at what age was that when you first started drinking that he left?
Yeah, so he left when I was around 13. And so, right around then, I started at least smoking cigarettes and light drinking. And then I think by 14, 15, I was like able to get like really drunk.
Yeah. And there was no other substance?
I mean, there was no substance I wouldn't turn down. But there was no substance that I became as addicted to. I think because it's a part of being high functioning, right? Is that I don't want to get arrested for buying crack, right? Like, I lived in Philly. Like, I don't want to get, to compromise this like facade. And so I think that I would do drugs if I was like 3 steps removed from it. Like, somebody else had gotten them and I would then, partake. But I think alcohol is something that a lot of people can convince themselves they don't have a problem with because it's so like readily available. I always just thought like, well, everyone does this, right? Like, everyone's doing this, but I didn't understand that I was doing it to like such a greater extent than other people. And so like in college, not everyone is in the ER getting their stomach pumped. Like, not everyone's like breaking their nose, like falling over. And so, but it still seemed kind of funny and it wasn't a big deal. Like, everyone's drinking, but everyone wasn't having the same consequences that I was having. And it took a long time to sort of admit that.
And what were those consequences?
I mean, just like, it didn't seem like a big deal. It was like always losing my shoes, always losing my keys, not remembering things, waking up with like bruises, a lot of that, like and just like bad judgment, right? Like making really bad decisions.
Did your family understand the extent of your addiction?
Absolutely not. No. There's like, again, it's actually very similar to my husband where there's really like no such thing as addiction. It's just stop drinking as much, and also I think to a big extent they didn't want to see it. And even when I was like, oh, I'm going to become a recovery coach, they're like, why? Like, they still don't understand it as that big an issue, even though my brother is also like in AA. And so I think it's just a cultural thing where you don't want to like, again, admit any weakness.
Yeah, definitely. And so it was hard for you to get even help from them, right? So when you realized that it's basically you did it on your own.
For sure. Yeah, that was like, there was no way I was going to tell them. And actually, there was no way that I was going to tell my husband that I was actively trying to not drink until I was more successful at it, if it makes sense. So I had to get a month or two before I even told him, like, I think this is something I'm going to do permanently. My parents, I just never really, it's just really hard to address it. They're like, oh, you don't drink? Like, and they would still try to like pour me a glass of wine, if that makes sense, when I would go visit. It wasn't to be cruel or anything like that. They just think, well, you can drink wine. That's not alcohol. It's like, that's still alcohol. Like, yeah, they didn't get it. They still don't, but it is, I mean, it's funny. So sort of, I mean, it's not, but I do really like breaking that stigma for like other cultures, like especially for Indian people. It's like, it's okay to have a mental health issue. It's okay to have an addiction. The problem is just like hiding it your whole life.
Yeah. And you said you have a 9-year-old niece and a 19-year-old niece, right? Now,
Yes.
So do you teach them about recovery, and how do they look? Because I know the rest of your family is like taboo, right? But now this new generation that's coming behind you.
Yeah.
And these are your brother's daughters?
Yeah, they haven't seen him in over many, many, many years.
Yeah. So, and how is that affecting them?
So the idea that the 19-year-old hasn't seen him since she was like 6, and the 9-year-old hasn't seen him since she was like 4 or 5. So they were very young, and they know that the reason that, like, they know their dad is sick, right? And that's why they can't see him. And try not to use words like he's not making a choice. He still loves you. He just, isn't well enough to see you. But in terms of like alcohol, I talk to them like all the time. I try to make it like light. Like, I don't want to like sit there and like lecture them about it. But I think just not having alcohol in my home, and also like making it fun to like make other types of drinks with my 9-year-old niece. And just, if something comes up on TV, I'll just be like, well, you're never going to do that. Like, if someone's drinking, and with the 19-year-old, kind of the same thing. Like, they're really good kids. She's such a good kid. And I think some people, I never grew up with any fear of alcohol or like drugs. And so I think when you grow up with it, there's a little bit of a barrier. Like, I can't see her heavily drinking. And their moms are really, their moms suffered being married to an alcoholic. And so they are pretty passionately alcohol free also.
Yeah. And it's like you said she was going to college too. Like, my daughter's also going to college, and those are the things I fear too. I have a 21 going to 22. She's about to finish college. And
what do you say to them?
I'll be honest. I'm a truth teller to them, right? I'd rather for them to hear the truth from me, right, than a lie from somebody else. And I'll be honest to them. Like, I'm in recovery myself. I'll be 9 years, God willing, this year. So I talk to them about it, right? I talk to them about my feelings, my emotions too. That's tied into my recovery, right? I talk to them about the feelings and emotions that I had when I was in my addiction.
I definitely, I tell them stories about my addiction, and just, try to reinforce, like, you never want to feel like that. Like, it's not something you ever want to do.
No, but at the same time, it's preparing them, right? I guess. So do you get in recovery right before you sell the business, or right after you sell the business?
Right after, because I knew that I would have a lot more free time, and I didn't know what to do with free time other than drink. And so really soon after I got into recovery, I really was one of those people think it's crazy. I was just like a one and done. Like, I just had a horrifying hangover one day and just said, I'm not going to drink today. It was like the first day in like 10 years. I'm just not going to drink today. And I didn't. And then, I was deeply uncomfortable, and
it's dangerous too, right?
Excruciating. Yeah, it can be. I was super lucky that the physical symptoms weren't as severe, but I was super uncomfortable, like super anxious. I wasn't sleeping well. And I was doing a lot of weird home improvement projects, like around the house at night. And like,
you said you did meetings, but you said they weren't 12-step.
so this one was a very large meeting. But yeah, they don't really follow any specific pathway. And so I love AA. My brother's in AA and I learned a lot about AA. And so I love the steps. But I think the structure just wasn't for me, like the format and the like, because I was also like always working so much. And then even when I stopped, I had like all these things and I was like, I don't want to stop my day to go to a meeting. And so I did go to AA a few times, and every time I was having a hard time, I would go to a meeting. If I had a hard time, like, 1 month, I would go to a couple meetings. But yeah, the consistency didn't come until I was going through a really hard time.
We do all recovery meetings at CCAR, and I find it very interesting when somebody that's never been to an all recovery meeting and they go for the first time, and at first you could see them, they're like, what is this? And then after the hour passes, they be like, wow, this is kind of good. This is kind of cool. People can share how they want to share. Not saying that in the 12-step you can't share like that, but it's just a little different in an all recovery meeting.
Yeah, for sure. I was more interested in meetings and that's why I did, start my own meetings where you can talk to each other. So there's feedback. And so, that's one thing you don't do in AA. You don't crosstalk. And so it was something that I really needed. And it's like you can do AA and you can go to other meetings. So it's like you can always have that as your main thing. But I think it's important to get perspective.
Multiple pathways.
So I was going to the meetings that I was telling you about, and they were just huge. And I just felt like it wasn't the right format for me. Like I wasn't going to share in front of 200 people. And also I didn't want to just like vent. So the format was you would pick their Zoom hand, they would vent, and then go to the next person and they would vent. So there was no interaction. And I didn't need to vent. Like I needed someone to tell me it's going to be okay. And that, you get through things like this and you get through them sober. And so I really looked for smaller groups that allowed some sort of conversation, and I couldn't find them. And so I thought, well, let me see, let me keep looking. I kept looking. I talked to tons of people and I was like, is this missing in the sort of like recovery space? Like, are there meetings where people are, together, they can chat like about, whatever's bugging them and get advice and get feedback. And also I thought, it would be great if I could be around other people going through like a life transition, like people who have to rebuild their life sober. Because there's a lot of things in that. Like there's a lot of like sober dating and, things like there's financial stuff that you're dealing with when you're rebuilding a life. And so I couldn't find it. I couldn't find anything like it. So I just started thinking, like, what if we made groups where people are matched on some criteria, not like demographic, like not like, whatever race or anything like that, but more what are they struggling with? And so I meet with people for like 5 to 10 minutes. I talk to them and then I think that they would be perfect for this group. And so usually we'll slot them into a group. And so that's what we have multiple small groups.
How many groups?
And right now we have like 5 groups. Mm-hmm. And the groups are about like 15 people, 20 people. And then we kind of will spin off a group from that. So I noticed too, there was like a lot of healthcare providers like me, like when I was an orthodontist, like I wouldn't have gotten help because I was so scared to tell anyone because you have this job that's so important. And so we have a lot of nurses, a lot of other like healthcare providers. And so we can always like spin off a group off of like a bigger group. And so, yeah, it's great.
Do these groups have titles to the groups? Do you have names to the groups or?
Yeah, they have names and then they also have their own Slack channels. So they can communicate 24 hours a day and then they're together for their meetings. So they meet twice a week and they are together with the same people. So they know each other. So they don't have to go through their whole story again. So they don't have to say, I wouldn't, for example, be like, so my husband left and then, have to start the story again. Like they already know that about each other. And also we're really open to people that aren't sure what their relationship with alcohol is going to be going forward. And so I'm not, insisting everyone be abstinent or sober. It's for me, but, it doesn't work for everyone. And so I'm really open to, multiple pathways.
Yeah, and that's like one of our principles. You are in recovery if you say you are, or when you say you are, right?
Yeah.
And that's very important for people to hear, because then it allows an opening. You're not, it's like the only way you can unlock this door is if you have this special key, and it's a recovery key. And if you don't have it, you can't get in. It's like, no, that door is always going to be open, that you could just walk right in.
That is sometimes what prevents people from going to an AA meeting, is they're like, well, I don't want to say I'm powerless against alcohol. I don't want to say that I will never drink again and start working this step. And so, it makes sense that there needs to be a separate space for people that are just trying to figure it out. And, it's rough to tell people who have like a slip, like, now you're back on day one. And so we don't do that. It's like, you had 45 alcohol-free days this month.
Yep.
Or like in the last few months. That's what's important. Yep. You learned a lot from those alcohol-free days.
And what's important is what we do from here on out, right?
Yeah. I did the CCAR recovery coaching, and I loved it. And I thought there's something that you learn in it that you don't learn from being in recovery. And like one of those, you're right, is you say you're in recovery if you say you are. And I don't think that I would have understood that unless I had gone through the program. I think that it was really important to understand, like, oh, so we're not coaching people to sobriety. Like we're coaching people to whatever their goals are. And so, I think it's really important that people have some sort of, coaching background or some sort of coaching training, because I think it really helped.
When was it that you started Everbloom?
So, I started talking to people and saying, like, is this something you would be interested in around probably Thanksgiving? And then I started taking signups right before the new year, and just sign up as in, like, would you sign up? And so I had like tons of people sign up saying, I really want to do something like this. And then we just started in the new year. And so it's been 7-8 months. Yeah.
Is it it's an online website, but it's not an app, right? You can't,
No, it's not an app. So it's the website. You go on, you see like what plan works for you, and then, or you can just sign up and have like a couple of minute talk with me. If you have more questions, things like that, and then you get put into a group.
And you said you have individuals already in there. Now, is this worldwide that you're doing this, or is this only in your state?
Yeah, no, I mean, we take everybody. So that's actually the nice thing, is that people feel better about the sort of anonymity aspect, because they're not with people that are in their geographic area. So anyone can sign up, and the likelihood that you're in the same town as somebody is like 0.001%.
And what is like the platform is like a Zoom that you go in and have conversations like in a group setting? That's cool.
Yeah, so the platform is a Zoom, and it's just really small. So typically we don't go over 12 people in a Zoom room. So there's a lot of freedom in the discussion. And so everyone can chat like about anything they want. And also they can say things that they would maybe be not comfortable saying in a group of more people. And so it's really, it's great. And even last night we had a meeting and someone had a really tough time this week. And so on the Slack, a couple of hours later, everyone's like encouraging her, giving her support. And
That's
so
awesome.
They have that too. I think what I would say to people is that it's all just like about like small changes, right, in your mindset. And so if you make a small change today, a month from now, things will be different. If you make a small change every day, that'll compound into something bigger. And so you have to break up recovery into pieces. Even though technically I was like one and done, I had been thinking about it for years. I thought about it for years. I tried moderating for years, but I think it's just important to like be mindful of it and make as many small changes as you can. So our website is joineverbloom.com, BLUME, and then we're either Join Everbloom or Everbloom on every social media platform.
I'm going to check it out. I'm definitely going to check it out. It was a pleasure to have a conversation with you. Thank you so much.